Yeah, Marianne, I was diagnosed with ADHD back 4.5 years ago, I think. So I was 44 at the time. It was probably just before the time that it kind of exploded, where um, I didn't really know any other adults that had it, which is funny because when I was younger, I worked with young people with ADHD, which is quite ironic. But for me, which is what I was going to say about one of my misconceptions, which I can join in there, is that only children have it, which I would probably have been guilty without consciously thinking it, that it's just children that have it. Mine came about quite unexpectedly, I guess. I've never really slept a lot, um, and I've always sort of been on the go. Um, and we had some issues with my eldest lad, but more about him not sleeping. But not that I would have ever thought he had necessarily got ADHD. And then I was reading an article one day and I thought, that's me. When I read through it all, I thought, whoa, that's me. And I thought, so I was very lucky. My husband's work, we went through a private health. So literally within 4 weeks, I'd gone from that to a diagnosis. So I was very, very lucky. And it was funny because in that very moment when I got that diagnosis, my whole world and my life made sense. Like Emma probably understands. All of the stuff that I didn't really even know didn't make sense, just suddenly did. I was like, ah, ah. And every day for a long time, I had those moments of, oh, wow, now I understand. And since then, I've used it to, I suppose, improve myself. If I suppose I see it like that. Um, and I think there's quite a lot of misconceptions around diagnosis. Even one of my best friends, who isn't a friend anymore, even said to me, you made it all up to get your diagnosis." I was like, "For what? What? I haven't even got anything. I haven't got anything for it." And I thought, I didn't make it up, but also, um, I have used it to be able to make many, many changes to my life. But the other half of so I've got my own business. I train trainers. That's mainly what I do. So I used to work in care, but I also train trainers, and I've tried to use it. I heard Shabnam some of the things you were talking about. So one of the biggest things for me was I didn't ever really realize I struggled at school until I realized suddenly that I had struggled at school all the way through. I failed two of my A levels. I just struggled. I think I did a psychology degree as well. And I sat there most of the time and used to think, I've walked in late or something, because I don't feel like I know what's going on here. But I stuck with it. And it was only then when I started, so I trained to be a teacher sort of later on, like when I was about 30. It was only then when I started teaching trainers and teachers, but I realized the whole reason I found learning hard was because the teaching wasn't inclusive, and it was because I struggled because of my ADHD. And so for me now, it's, I suppose although I do the teacher training, I do advocate for, um, what I want is that anybody that is going to be training people, anybody, it could be any, I train all people that work in all different sectors. And because there are so many misconceptions, what I find is that although people learn how to teach with me, they actually learn about themselves. And so many people have come to me at the end of the training because I am very open, like you said, Shabnam. I probably purposely, I don't know if right from the beginning I would say, because sometimes I like it to come out that people will see that they didn't know. So people say to me, I never would have thought you had ADHD. You seem really normal. Well, that's debatable what normal is and whether I am anyway. But um, so often I will then say about that I've had this diagnosis, but so often people come up to me at the end. I think I probably have got autism as well. Potentially, I don't know. I wasn't assessed for it. Um, But what I find is that people say that because I've embraced that disability, I think that it's other people that disable people. I try to make my sessions as inclusive as possible, and that doesn't necessarily mean covering all bases. It just means that if people say to me, could you do this, can you do that, I'll work with them to do whatever I can, because the fact is I lived 44 years without a diagnosis. So for me, when I'm working with people, yes, I'm concerned if somebody does have a disability, but everybody has needs in that room. And some people may never get that diagnosis, and some people may not want to say. They might not want to say. But so for me, one of the biggest things is people feeling heard, because for me, one of the biggest things that I wanted to be seen. And I just love it when people do say to me, I felt like for the first time ever, I was seen when I was in your session. I felt seen. And it's just so wonderful, because I strived so hard, sort of 4.5 years up the line. I'm still learning, but it's so wonderful to be able to pass on what I've gone through to other people, to give them the strength. And the other side of what I do is I work with managers in the workplace. So I get access to work. So I get a support worker who helps me with my business, from administration stuff to sitting in meetings. And one of the biggest things for a start, I don't like the fact that I was given some coaching, because I don't need to be coached out of being me. Thank you very much. I'm quite happy being me. Generally speaking, other people are the problem. So one of the things that, having spoken to a manager somewhere where I was working, teaching, they said it's been amazing hearing about you talk about the things you've struggled with, the things that would help. And they said, why don't you work with managers to actually coach them so that they can understand? Because he said, in all honesty, I never would have. He said, if I heard ADHD, I wouldn't really have known what it was necessarily, or we would have all had those preconceptions. But that also it would be really helpful for him as well, to understand how to help somebody. Because he said, I know that there's people I now know who probably are neurodiverse. He said, before I thought they were irritating, but he said, now I understand what's behind it. I completely understand. So I think for me, some of the misconceptions were, we've probably all heard it, we're all a bit ADHD. And I'm like, well, spend a day in my life and you might not see it necessarily, because I probably do a good job of just getting on with it. But what people don't see is like that I have to work till 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm trying to get stuff done that I didn't get done in the day, when I was just staring at my screen, not really knowing what I was doing or how I was wasting time. I think one of the other things as well is that people think it's an excuse for bad behavior, which could be laziness. People say to me, why can't you just try a bit harder? And I go, okay, let me just get some more energy from somewhere. Because I think people see that, because like with me, people say, oh, you're so strong, Marianne. You always keep going. And I think, well, I haven't got a choice, because the other side of, for me, with having ADHD is I'm quite a perfectionist, which is quite funny because I make quite a lot of mistakes as well, but that's just the other side of it. So I'm quite a perfectionist. So I've been going through some difficult personal things in the last sort of 4 years. And so when I look at my business and look at other people, for me, it's never good enough what I'm doing, despite the fact I kind of want to shout to everybody. Actually, I actually got up this morning, and that was quite a big thing. But the other side of me is, I'm not doing well enough. I'm not doing good enough. I know for me, the procrastination is quite a big one. And I know with ADHD, a lot of people just think a lot of the behaviors are things that would be things that you should be able to do. So I will lie in bed and think I need to get up. And I'm like, I just can't. So I have to set my alarm for 5 in the morning. I hate getting up, but I have to set it, and I have to set myself to go to the gym for 6. Not because I love it, but if I don't, my day just goes wrong. And the minute it starts going wrong, I start telling myself I'm terrible, and then it just all kind of goes wrong. So for me, I try and be as accountable as possible. So I try to set things up. So because I don't like being wrong. I don't like being wrong. So I'll usually, like my support worker, I'll say to him, can you ask me this or whatever? But it's taken a long time to develop that relationship because of something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Don't know if anybody's heard of it. It's in a nutshell, it's where you're very, very sensitive. Your emotions very, very sensitive. So I look back previously, I used to fall out with people a lot. You know, if you ask people, they'd say, really lovely person, but I'd fall out with them. I now understand why. It's because I'd be particularly sensitive. My relationships would often fall apart because if someone cancelled on me or a boyfriend said things in a certain way, I would go 0 to 100 in all of about 10 seconds. So it's taken a long time for me to develop the relationship I've got with my support worker, where he knows how to speak to me, but also how to react to me, because it's taken a lot, to get to that point. And one of the other ones I was going to say is that people say to me, but you're really intelligent. You can't have ADHD. Well, you only have to look at the number of entrepreneurs that are out there, and a lot of them do have it. Or they say to me, you're not running around all the time. Well, I know for me, I struggle to switch off. Again, since I've been diagnosed, I do work really, really hard at saying to myself, Marianne, it's midnight. You do need to go to sleep. Your brain would let you stay awake all night, but you really do need, to go to sleep now. But again, there's just so many misconceptions out there. And I think the biggest one for me was that laziness one, and just try harder. Because what people don't see is that every single day is an uphill struggle. Some days I deal with it really well, and then there's other days that I just think I don't want to do this anymore. It's really, really difficult because the shame, that you feel from the comments that people make, and they may just be throwaway comments from people, but they really, really hurt. And that's why for me, I just like it when people feel seen around me and they feel heard, and they come forward and say to me, it was been really inspiring seeing that you just get on, because I like to give people that strength. Because the biggest thing was that I'm just me now. I'm just me. And yeah, I think if people can be that and they can own it, I hope then that will start getting rid of some of those misconceptions, because people will be able to talk about it more and not feel embarrassed, because I don't feel embarrassed of who I am anymore, and I used to be as well. Just here. Yeah, I think the sleep thing, from Kaz there, the sleep thing, it's a funny one, because when you know, you know. And I say to people now, do you know what? Actually, even if you never get a diagnosis, and that's one of the reasons I speak up, is because if you never get a diagnosis, if you feel it and you feel any of those symptoms, they're yours. They're yours. And actually, I now just don't put myself around people that don't want to listen. So like you said, Shabnam, if someone says that that's how they feel or that's how it affects them, then you listen to them. And if I don't feel listened by people, I just don't put myself around them anymore. And then they miss out on me. And that's their affair. So I think I could probably talk all night about it, but I'm not going to. So if anybody wants to ask me anything, you can.